Michael Sullivan stood before the bathroom mirror in his Chicago penthouse, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. At 52, he cut an impressive figure, silver threading through his dark hair only added to his distinguished appearance. 25 years of building Sullivan Financial Partners into a respected firm had earned him this view of Lake Michigan, but this morning, something felt off. His wife Catherine's perfume lingered in the air, Chanel No. 5 mixed with something else he couldn't quite place. She'd left early for her charity board meeting, as she had every Thursday for the past 6 months. The bed was made with military precision, her signature touch that he'd grown to appreciate over their 18 years of marriage. "Dad?" His son Jason's voice carried from the kitchen. "You've got a call from Uncle Robert. Says it's urgent." Michael frowned, checking his Patek Philippe watch. His younger brother rarely called this early unless something was wrong. Walking into his home office, he picked up the landline, one of his few concessions to old-school business practices. "Robert? What's going on?" "Mike, we need to talk." Robert's voice carried that same tension it had when he'd warned Michael about the 2008 crash months before it happened. "It's about Catherine, and the Foundation's accounts." A chill ran down Michael's spine. As the financial advisor for his wife's charitable foundation, he'd noticed small discrepancies over the past few months but had attributed them to clerical errors. "What about them?" "Not over the phone. Meet me at Gibson's in an hour. There's something you need to see." Michael agreed, his mind already racing through possibilities. He'd built his reputation on trust and careful management of other people's money. The foundation was Catherine's passion project, helping families affected by domestic violence, the kind of work that had drawn him to her in the first place. In the kitchen, Jason was finishing his breakfast, athletic frame hunched over a bowl of protein-enhanced oatmeal. At 24, he was everything Michael had hoped for in a son, smart, hard-working, and already showing promise at the firm. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Just some business with Uncle Robert," Michael replied, forcing a smile. "How about dinner tonight? Invite Sarah too, haven't seen my future daughter-in-law in weeks." Jason's face clouded slightly. "She's been busy with her new job at Morton Stevens. Their merger's keeping everyone working late." Morton Stevens. The name triggered something in Michael's memory. Hadn't Catherine mentioned them in connection with the foundation? He filed the thought away for later. The drive to Gibson's gave Michael time to think. The past year had brought subtle changes in Catherine, new friends, late nights at foundation events, and increased interest in the financial details of their joint accounts. He'd attributed it to her growing independence, even admired her for it. Now, doubt crept in like morning fog off the lake. Robert was already seated in their usual corner booth, a manila envelope on the table before him. His brother's usual easy smile was nowhere to be seen. "Mike, before I show you this, I need you to promise me you'll think before you act. This isn't just about money. Just show me, Rob." The contents of the envelope stopped Michael's heart for a moment. Bank statements, transfer records, and surveillance photos painted a picture he didn't want to, believe. Catherine, his Catherine, in intimate settings with James Morton himself. Financial records showing systematic transfers from the foundation to offshore accounts. Email printouts discussing what appeared to be a long-term plan. "The foundation's annual audit is next month," Robert said quietly. "This would have come out then, but I thought, you deserved to know first. There's more, Mike. It's not just the foundation money. She's been moving your personal assets too." Michael stared at a photo of Catherine leaving Morton's penthouse, dated just 2 days ago. The second perfume he'd noticed that morning suddenly had a source. "How long have you known?" "I started putting it together last month. Needed to be sure before I came to you." "Mike, there's something else. Sarah, Jason's fiancée. She's not just working at Morton Stevens by accident. Look at the last page." The final document was a text message exchange between Catherine and Sarah, discussing Michael's schedule, his habits, his vulnerabilities. His own daughter-in-law-to-be was part of whatever this was. The question is, Robert leaned forward, what are you going to do about it? Michael carefully returned the documents to the envelope, his hands steady despite the earthquake happening in his chest. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught him to keep his expression neutral, but inside, something fundamental was shifting. The Michael Sullivan who had walked into Gibson's wasn't the same man sitting there now. First, he said, his voice carrying a coldness that made Robert flinch, I'm going to finish my coffee. Then we're going to talk about how to handle this, properly. The Sullivan way. As he lifted his cup, Michael's mind was already working, calculating moves and countermoves. Catherine, James Morton, and even Sarah had no idea what they'd started. They were about to learn why Chicago's financial elite had a saying, never trust a smiling Sullivan. The coffee was bitter on his tongue, but Michael didn't notice. He was too busy planning the first moves in a game that would reshape not just his life, but the lives of everyone who had thought him an easy mark. The quiet before the storm was over. The penthouse felt different when Michael returned that evening. Every familiar object seemed to mock him with memories, the antique vase Catherine had insisted on buying in Venice, the family photos chronicling 18 years of what he now knew to be an elaborate facade. He moved through the space like a ghost, seeing everything with new eyes. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, working late at the foundation. Don't wait up. The casual deception in those 8 words made his chest tighten. He typed back, okay, get some rest, with steady fingers, though his hand wanted to shake. In his home office, Michael unlocked the hidden wall safe behind an abstract painting, another of Catherine's choices. Inside lay documents he'd prepared years ago but hoped never to use, contingency plans, emergency protocols, and a list of trusted contacts. The irony wasn't lost on him that his paranoid preparation for business betrayals had blindsided him to the betrayal in his own home. Mr. Sullivan. Maria, their housekeeper of 15 years, appeared at the door. Her eyes held a weight he'd never noticed before. I think there's something you should know. Michael gestured for her to sit. How long have you known, Maria? Tears welled in her eyes. 6 months. Mrs. Sullivan started having private meetings here while you were at work. I heard things, saw things. But she threatened to deport my sister's family if I said anything. Maria's hands twisted in her lap. My sister has 3 children, Mr. Sullivan. I couldn't. It's not your fault, Michael said softly, though each new revelation felt like another knife in his back. But I need you to tell me everything now. The story Maria told filled in crucial gaps. James Morton had been visiting the penthouse regularly, but he wasn't alone in this scheme. Sarah, Jason's fiancée, had been the connection. Her job at Morton Stevens wasn't coincidence but calculated placement. She'd been feeding information about both Jason and Michael to Catherine and Morton for months. And Jason, my son has no idea. Maria shook her head. He's in love, Mr. Sullivan. He doesn't see what she really is. Michael's phone rang, Jason's name lighting up the screen. Dad? Sarah and I are on our way for dinner. Want us to pick up wine? The normalcy of the question hit Michael like a physical blow. His son was walking into a nightmare, and Michael had to decide right now how to handle it. Actually, son, something's come up at work. Rain check. A pause. Everything okay, Dad? You sound off. Just tired. Big merger coming up. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. We'll do it next week. After hanging up, Michael turned to Maria. I need you to do something for me. Keep acting normal. Watch, listen, but don't let on that anything's changed. Can you do that? She nodded, wiping her eyes. What are you going to do? Protect my son. And then. Michael's voice hardened, make things right. That night, Michael set his plan in motion. First, a call to Judge Marcus Williams, an old friend who owed him several favors. Then to his private investigator, Tom Chen, with instructions to dig deeper into Morton Stevens and their recent merger activities. Finally, to his brother Robert. I need access to the Foundation's backup servers, Michael said without preamble. The ones Catherine doesn't know about. Already on it, Robert replied. Mike, what about Jason? The question cut deep. How do you tell your son that his fiancée is part of a conspiracy to destroy his family? That the woman he loves is using him as a pawn in a larger game? Not yet. We need more pieces in place first. Michael stared out at the Chicago skyline, lights twinkling like distant stars. Did you contact Diana Chen at the SEC? Meeting her for breakfast tomorrow. Off the record, of course. Michael nodded, though his brother couldn't see it. Good. And Robert? Thank you. For telling me the truth when others wouldn't. The next morning, Michael maintained his routine with mechanical precision. Same workout, same breakfast, same drive to the office. But now he noticed the subtle surveillance, the dark sedan that had been parked across the street for weeks, the maintenance worker, who appeared regularly in his building's lobby. In his office, Michael's secretary Linda brought his usual coffee and a stack of documents. Your wife called, she said carefully. Wanted to remind you about the Foundation's gala next week. The gala. Of course. The perfect venue for whatever endgame Catherine and Morton were planning. Michael smiled, and for the first time since yesterday, it reached his eyes. Please tell her I wouldn't miss it for the world. Alone again, Michael opened his laptop and began typing an email to his most trusted client, retired CIA operative turned private security consultant Jack Morrison. The subject line read, "Need your expertise for a delicate matter." His phone buzzed with another text from Catherine, "Lunch today? Miss you." The casual cruelty of her continued deception crystallized something in Michael's heart. He'd built his empire on understanding human nature, on anticipating betrayal and protecting against it. He'd just never expected to use those skills against his own wife. Sorry, busy day, he texted back. Rain check. Of course, darling. Don't work too hard. Michael set the phone down and turned to his computer, where multiple screens displayed financial data, surveillance footage, and communication logs. In one window, a live feed showed Catherine entering James Morton's private elevator at Morton Stevens. In another, Sarah sat at her desk, phone to her ear, unaware that every word she spoke was now being recorded. The pieces were falling into place. But as Michael studied the data flowing across his screens, a new pattern emerged, one that suggested this conspiracy went far deeper than personal betrayal. Something bigger was in play, something that threatened not just his marriage but everything he'd built. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Sullivan. There's a Ms. Chen from the SEC here to see you. She says it's urgent. Michael smiled again, but this time it was the smile that had made him famous in Chicago's financial district, the one that meant someone had just walked into his trap. Send her in, he said, closing his laptop. And Linda? Hold all my calls. This might take a while. Diana Chen's revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. The Foundation isn't just moving money, she said, sliding documents across his desk. It's laundering it. And Morton Stevens isn't just a law firm anymore, they're the architects of something much bigger. The papers detailed a complex web of transactions, each seemingly legitimate on the surface. But together, they painted a picture that made Michael's blood run cold. The Domestic Violence Foundation wasn't just Catherine's passion project, it was a front for an international money laundering operation. Victim support funds were being used to clean dirty money from sources Michael didn't want to contemplate. Your wife's signature is on everything, Diana said softly. But Michael, there's more. Look at the beneficiary lists. The names jumped out at him: shell companies, offshore accounts, and buried in the middle, a trust in Jason's name. His son wasn't just an unwitting pawn, he was being set up as the fall guy. If this unraveled, Jason would take the blame. Michael's hands trembled as he set down the documents. How long have you been tracking this? 8 months. We needed someone on the inside to build a case. When your brother reached out. Diana hesitated. Michael, there's something else. Sarah's real name isn't Sarah Anderson. She's Sarah Morton. James Morton's daughter. The revelation struck him like a thunderbolt. His son wasn't just dating a conspirator, he was being used in an elaborate honey trap. The depth of the manipulation made Michael physically ill. His phone buzzed, a text from Jason: "Dad, we need to talk. It's important." Michael stared at the message, his heart breaking. How much did Jason know? Was he starting to see through Sarah's facade, or was this another trap? "I need time," he told Diana. "To protect my son." She nodded. "You have 48 hours before we move. After that, I can't control what happens." After Diana left, Michael sat in his darkened office, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Chicago. His computer pinged with an incoming email from Jack Morrison, his security consultant. The surveillance photos showed Catherine meeting with not just James Morton, but with figures Michael recognized from less savory corners of the financial world. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sullivan. Your son is here." Michael took a deep breath, straightening his tie. "Send him in." Jason entered, looking more troubled than Michael had ever seen him. At 24, his son still had moments where he seemed like the little boy who used to run into his office for goodbye hugs before school. Now, that innocence was about to be shattered. "Dad." Jason's voice cracked. "I found something. About Sarah. About the foundation." Michael's heart stopped. "Sit down, son. I was helping her move some files to her new office, and I saw." Jason pulled out his phone, hands shaking. "These documents. At first, I thought I was reading them wrong. But then I started digging." He looked up, eyes filled with pain. "Did you know?" "Since yesterday," Michael admitted. "I was trying to figure out how to tell you." Jason slumped in his chair. "I loved her, Dad. I really loved her. Was any of it real?" The vulnerability in his son's voice broke something in Michael. He moved around the desk, pulling Jason into a hug like he hadn't done since his son was a teenager. Jason's shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry, son. But we're going to fix this. Together." When Jason finally pulled back, his eyes were red but determined. "What do they want? Why go through all this?" Michael gestured to his computer screens. "It's bigger than just us. The foundation, Morton Stevens, they're part of something massive. And they were setting you up to take the fall if it went wrong." "Mom's involved?" The question hung in the air like poison. Michael chose his words carefully. "She's made choices, son. Choices that put everything we've built at risk. Including you." Jason's expression hardened in a way that reminded Michael painfully of himself. "What's our play?" "First, we protect you. I've got people working on nullifying that trust in your name. Then." Michael pulled up the foundation's gala invitation on his screen. "We spring their trap." "The gala." Jason nodded slowly. "Everyone will be there." "But Dad, what about Mom?" The question hit Michael like a knife to the heart. Despite everything, Catherine was still Jason's mother. The woman who had kissed his scraped knees, celebrated his achievements, shaped him into the man he'd become. The complexity of that love, even in the face of betrayal, was something Michael understood all too well. Your mother made her choices, Michael said gently. Now we have to make ours. They spent the next hour planning, father and son united in purpose for the first time in years. As they talked, Michael watched Jason transform from a betrayed lover into a strategic ally. The pain was still there, but it was hardening into something else, determination. His phone buzzed again, Catherine, sending a photo of herself trying on a gown for the gala. What do you think, darling? Too dramatic? Michael showed the message to Jason, whose face went through a complex series of emotions before settling into grim resolve. Answer her, he said. Keep her thinking everything's normal. Perfect, Michael typed back. You'll be the belle of the ball. As Jason left the office that evening, he paused at the door. Dad? Thank you. For telling me the truth when you found out. For not keeping me in the dark to protect me. Michael nodded, throat tight with emotion. After Jason left, he turned back to his computers, where multiple screens tracked the movements of Catherine, the Mortons, and their associates. In one window, a countdown timer ticked away the hours until the gala. His phone lit up with a message from Jack Morrison, package secured. Special delivery arranged for gala night. Everything was falling into place. But as Michael stared at the photo Catherine had sent, he couldn't help but wonder, in a game where everyone wore masks, who would be left standing when they finally fell away? The answer, he suspected, would cost more than any of them were prepared to pay. The night of the gala arrived with an unseasonable chill, wind whipping off Lake Michigan as Michael adjusted his bow tie in the master bathroom. Catherine's reflection appeared behind him, resplendent in midnight blue silk that caught the light like moving water. For a moment, the sight of her stole his breath, not for her beauty, but for the crushing weight of memories that flooded his mind. You're quiet tonight, she said, reaching around him for her earrings. Her perfume, the same blend that had first alerted him to her deception, wrapped around him like a familiar noose. Just thinking about how far we've come, he replied, their eyes meeting in the mirror. All these years together. The foundation. Everything we've built. Something flickered in Catherine's eyes, regret. Fear. But it vanished so quickly he might have imagined it. We've done good work, Michael. Changed lives. The irony of her words made his chest ache. The foundation had indeed changed lives, but not in the way its donors believed. He thought of the real victims of domestic violence, whose support funds had been diverted into offshore accounts. The betrayal went beyond their marriage, it struck at everything he'd believed about the woman he'd loved. Yes, he said softly. We certainly have. Downstairs, Jason waited with Robert. The brothers exchanged a knowing look as Catherine descended the stairs like a queen holding court. Michael watched his son's face, saw the complex play of emotions as Jason looked at his mother, love warring with knowledge of her betrayal. You look beautiful, Mom, Jason managed, his voice steady despite everything. Catherine embraced him, and Michael saw his son stiffen slightly at her touch. My handsome boy, she said. I'm so proud of the man you've become. The drive to the Drake Hotel passed in carefully maintained small talk. Michael noticed how Catherine kept glancing at her phone, the subtle tension in her shoulders. She was waiting for something. The thought came unbidden, how many times had she sat beside him like this, playing her role while plotting his destruction? The hotel's ballroom glittered with Chicago's elite. Michael recognized faces from boardrooms and charity boards, all of them here to support what they believed was a noble cause. His gaze found James Morton holding court near the bar, Sarah at his side. The family resemblance was obvious now that he knew to look for it. Michael. Morton's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. And Catherine, radiant as always. His eyes lingered on her a fraction too long. Jason, good to see you. Sarah's been talking about nothing else. Sarah stepped forward to embrace Jason, who accepted it with remarkable composure. I missed you, she whispered, loud enough for Michael to hear. Did you? Jason's voice carried a hint of steel that made Sarah step back, confusion crossing her face. As dinner began, Michael watched the carefully choreographed dance playing out around him. Catherine working the room, touching shoulders, laughing at jokes. Morton moving from table to table, his network of influence spreading like a web. Through it all, his phone buzzed with updates from Jack Morrison's team, positioning themselves for what was to come. The moment arrived during Catherine's speech. She stood at the podium, passionate and compelling as she spoke about survivors of domestic abuse finding their voice, their strength. Michael felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest, not from betrayal this time, but from remembering why he'd fallen in love with her. The woman at the podium was everything he'd believed her to be. The tragedy was that it had all been a mask. And now, Catherine said, her voice carrying across the hushed room, I'm honored to announce a new partnership. Morton Stevens will be providing pro bono legal services to all our foundation's clients, ensuring that no survivor has to face the system alone. Applause filled the room. Michael caught Jason's eye across the table, saw his slight nod. It was time. He stood, glass in hand, moving to the podium as Catherine stepped aside. Her smile faltered slightly, this wasn't part of the program. I'd like to add something, Michael said, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. About voices being heard. About truth coming to light. The room fell silent. He could feel Catherine tensing beside him, see Morton setting down his glass with careful precision. You see, Michael continued, I've learned something about masks lately. About how the people closest to us can wear them so perfectly we forget to look underneath. He turned to face his wife, whose composure was cracking like thin ice. Would you like to tell them, Catherine? Or should I? The ballroom doors opened. Diana Chin entered, flanked by federal agents. At the same moment, Jack Morrison's team moved into position, blocking the exits. Sarah stood abruptly, reaching for her phone. Jason caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Don't, he said softly. It's over. Catherine's face transformed, the mask finally dropping away. But what Michael saw beneath it wasn't fear or anger, it was something else entirely. Something that made him realize the night was far from over. Oh, Michael, she said, her voice carrying a note he'd never heard before. You have no idea what you've just started. Behind them, a glass shattered. And then all hell broke loose. The chaos that erupted in the Drake Hotel's ballroom wasn't what anyone expected. As federal agents moved in, Catherine reached into her clutch and pulled out not a weapon, but a single USB drive. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a weight that stopped everyone in their tracks. Before you do this, Michael, there's something you need to see. Her eyes found Jason's across the room. Something you both need to see. Michael felt the shift in the air, saw Diana Chin signal her agents to hold position. Catherine's composure had changed, gone was the society wife's polished veneer, replaced by something harder, more purposeful. 18 years ago, Catherine continued, her voice carrying across the now silent room, I started this foundation because I believed in helping people escape impossible situations. What none of you know is that I was one of those people. She inserted the drive into the laptop controlling the ballroom's presentation screen. Security footage appeared, old, grainy, but clear enough. It showed a younger James Morton in what appeared to be a private office, engaged in conversation with several men Michael recognized from Chicago's less reputable business circles. James Morton didn't just offer legal services to abuse survivors, Catherine said. He used them. The foundation was his perfect hunting ground, vulnerable women, desperate for help, their abusers' money already in his pocket through legal fees. The footage changed, showing document after document, evidence of blackmail, exploitation, and worse. Morton's face had gone ashen, his carefully maintained facade crumbling. I was one of his earliest victims, Catherine continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. A young lawyer, running from an abusive marriage. He offered help, protection, and then he owned me. Used me to build this network, to find others he could control. Jason stood slowly, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Mom. Everything I've done, Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son, every lie I've told, was about getting close enough to bring him down. To stop him from destroying more lives. Michael's mind raced, re-evaluating every moment of their marriage through this new lens. The late nights, the separate accounts, the careful distance she'd maintained from certain aspects of their life together, it hadn't been about betrayal, but survival. Sarah Morton stepped forward, her own mask finally dropping. She's telling the truth. Her voice shook. I've been helping her gather evidence. Dad, he didn't just hurt clients. My mother. Morton lunged for the door, but Jack Morrison's team was faster. As they restrained him, Catherine turned to Michael, 18 years of unspoken truth in her eyes. I fell in love with you, Michael. That was never a lie. But I couldn't tell you what I was doing. If Morton had suspected. The offshore accounts? Michael asked, his voice hoarse. Evidence. Every transaction, every move, documented and sent to a secure server. We needed proof of the whole network, not just one man's crimes. She looked at Diana Chin. Check the drive. Everything you need is there. The whole operation, every player, every victim. The ballroom had become a storm of activity, federal agents securing exits, guests being escorted out, Morton and his associates in custody. But Michael stood frozen, staring at the woman he thought he knew, realizing he was only now truly seeing her. Jason moved first, crossing the room to embrace his mother. The sound of his quiet sobs broke something in Michael's chest. He watched as Catherine held their son, her own tears finally falling. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never wanted you to see this world. Either of you. Robert appeared at Michael's side, gripping his shoulder. She came to me 6 months ago, he admitted. Asked for help accessing the Foundation's records. I've been helping her build the case. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have tried to protect her. And she needed to finish this. Michael moved slowly toward his wife and son, the weight of truth pressing against his chest like a physical thing. Catherine looked up at him, vulnerability and strength warring in her expression. All these years, he said softly, you carried this alone. Not anymore, she replied, reaching for his hand. As federal agents led Morton away, Sarah stood apart, watching her father's disgrace with a complex mixture of relief and grief. Jason saw her isolation and, despite everything, moved to stand beside her. You were protecting people too, he said quietly. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for lying to you. But not for helping them. The night wasn't over. There would be statements to give, evidence to process, a complex web of truth and deception to unravel. But as Michael held his family, the wife who had fought a secret war for justice, the son who showed compassion even in betrayal, he realized that some masks, when they fall, reveal not darkness but unexpected light. Catherine's phone buzzed one final time. The message made her breath catch, more coming forward. They're ready to talk. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 months after the gala, Michael sat in the newly reorganized Foundation offices, watching Catherine speak to a group of survivors. The room was different now, warmer, filled with natural light and comfortable furniture that made it feel less like an institution and more like a sanctuary. But the real change was in his wife. Gone was the polished society mask she'd worn for so many years. This Catherine moved with a quiet authenticity, her strength visible in the gentle way she listened to each woman's story, in how she shared pieces of her own journey without flinching from the hard truths. The hardest part, she was saying, isn't leaving. It's believing you deserve to leave. Believing you're worth more than the cage they built around you. Michael noticed how the women leaned toward her, recognizing in Catherine someone who truly understood. Their eyes held the same mix of wariness and hope he'd seen in her own during those first weeks after the truth emerged, when they'd spent long nights talking, really talking, for what felt like the first time in their marriage. Sarah sat among the group, no longer Morton's daughter or Jason's fiancée, but her own person, a survivor finding her voice. The charges against her father had revealed decades of abuse in their own home, patterns of control and manipulation that had shaped her entire life. Yet here she was, turning that pain into purpose. Each of you, Catherine continued, has already shown more courage than you know. Coming here, speaking your truth, these aren't small things. They're the first steps toward reclaiming your life. Michael's phone buzzed softly, a text from Jason, who was now working with Diana Chen's team to track Morton's network of enablers. 3 more judges identified. Mom was right, this goes deeper than we thought. The investigation had revealed a web of corruption spanning multiple states, with Morton at the center, using his position to trap vulnerable women in cycles of legal dependency and exploitation. But for every corrupt official they uncovered, they found twice as many allies, other survivors, advocates, and law enforcement officers who had been waiting for a chance to bring the truth to light. Catherine finished speaking, and the group broke into smaller circles of conversation. Michael watched as Sarah approached his wife, their heads bent together in quiet discussion. Their relationship had evolved into something unexpected, mentor and student, survivors supporting each other's healing. Mr. Sullivan. A younger woman, Claire, he remembered, stood before him. Her eyes were clear now, though he remembered how haunted they'd looked when Catherine first brought her in. I wanted to thank you for standing by her when the truth came out. Not everyone would have understood. Michael thought about those first devastating moments at the gala, when his world had seemed to shatter. How that shattering had revealed something stronger underneath, not just in Catherine, but in all of them. Understanding took time, he admitted. But love was never the question. Claire nodded, twisting the ring she still wore on her right hand, not her wedding ring, but a simple band Catherine had given her, engraved with the word, worthy. Each survivor received one when they were ready. Catherine joined them, slipping her hand into Michael's with the easy confidence that had grown between them since the truth emerged. Claire's agreed to speak at the congressional hearing, she said. Her testimony could help pass the new protection laws. The Foundation's mission had expanded, moving beyond individual support to systemic change. Catherine's evidence had sparked investigations across the country, revealing similar patterns of legal exploitation targeting vulnerable women. But more importantly, it had created a network of survivors helping survivors, turning pain into power. Jason arrived as the meeting was ending, greeting Sarah with the careful warmth they developed, not romance anymore, but a friendship built on shared understanding and purpose. He hugged his mother, whispering something that made her smile, then turned to Michael. The FBI's moving on the Chicago judges tomorrow, he said. They want Mom there when they make the arrests. Catherine straightened, steel entering her posture. Then I'll be there. These women deserve to see justice done. Later that evening, in their home that no longer felt like a stage set but a true sanctuary, Michael found Catherine on the balcony. She was holding the journal she'd kept through all those years, her record of truth hidden behind carefully constructed lies. I'm thinking of writing it all down, she said as he joined her. The whole story. Not just for the investigation, but for them. So they know they're not alone. Michael wrapped his arms around her, feeling the strength in her slight frame. You never were, you know. Alone. Even when I didn't know what you were fighting, I was on your side. She turned in his embrace, eyes bright with tears and determination. I know that now. And that's part of the story too, how love survives truth. How it grows stronger. Inside, they could hear Jason and Sarah in the kitchen, their laughter mixing with the sounds of dinner preparation. 2 survivors' children, finding their own way to break cycles of pain. Catherine smiled at the sound. We're building something new, she said softly. All of us. Something stronger than the shadows they tried to trap us in. Michael thought of all the women he'd seen in the Foundation office, each carrying their own stories of survival. How they stood taller after speaking with Catherine, with Sarah. How strength multiplied when shared. "The hearing next week," he said. "How many are speaking?" 12 so far. But more keep coming forward. They're not afraid anymore. Catherine's voice held fierce pride. They've found their light. As the sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows that no longer held any terror, Michael understood that some battles don't end with a single victory. Real change comes in small moments of courage, in truths spoken and heard, in bridges built between broken places. The journal in Catherine's hands held years of darkness, but it had become a torch lighting the way for others. And in that light, they had all found something unexpected, not just survival, but transformation. Not just justice, but healing. Love, they had learned, was not about perfect knowledge or unbroken trust. It was about choosing to stand together in the light, even after seeing each other's shadows. It was about building something new from the pieces of what was broken. And they were just beginning.